Our next question is from Jeremy in Michigan.
This is Jeremy from Dearborn Heights. My question for the minimalists and simpletons is, how do you stop buying? Dave Ramsey talks about the stupid tax, and I feel that I must like paying it, even to the point of getting out of credit card debt to then going back $30,000 in the hole. It happens not only buying things I don't need or even really want, but buying them over again because I've already donated another one in the past, sometimes even the recent past. Shopping seems to be my life, even if it is killing me.
Jeremy, I totally resonate with this. I found in my own life that shopping was compelling because my life was rather uninteresting. And I wanted to comfort myself with retail therapy. Why do you think, Michael, why do you think retail therapy is so comforting to people?
Well, I think you just alluded to it. So this is kind of I'll try and keep this answer somewhat brief. Here's what I'll say. So as part of the Scarcity brand, I talked to this guy whose name is Thomas Zental, and he's in his 80s. He's this old school behavioral psychologist. He's been doing it since the 60s. Like, he came directly from Skinner. And he's done these experiments where he can basically turn a pigeon into a degenerate gambler in about 2 minutes. So how this works is all his pigeons live in these small sort of sterile cages, right? Their life seems fine to a scientist, but this is where they live. And he puts them in a bigger cage. He gives them the option of playing 2 different games. In the first game, they peck a light. Every other peck gets them 15 units of food. Okay, so it's a predictable game. Game 2 is like a slot machine. It's designed to mimic a slot machine. So every 5th peck, they get 20 units of food, but it's random. So the light might turn on, the food might come out the 2nd peck on one series. It might come out the 4th one on the next series. If you do the math, it makes far more sense to play the first game, right? Because if you do every other one, you're getting 15 versus one in every 5, you're getting 20. You get a lot more food by playing this predictable game. And there's this theory called the optimal foraging theory that basically says that all animals will do whatever they can to get the most amount of food for the least amount of effort. So basically that theory, along with common freaking sense, says, hey, pigeons, you should be playing the first game. When he puts them in the cages, 97.6% of pigeons choose to play the slot machine game.
Wow.
They choose the gambling game. Okay. And his point was, basically, you see that in humans too. We often do irrational things. And then he tells me, okay, here's this experiment we did though, that offsets this. What we do is we take pigeons and we put them in a big cage. It's this giant cage that's designed to mimic the wild. It's supposed to be exactly like a pigeon would live in the wild. So they get to hang out with other pigeons. They go up on rocks and roosts. They have to actually work. They're exactly like they'd be living in the wild. And then he puts them back in the cage, and every single pigeon chooses the rational game, the game that gets them more food. And so then he goes, when you think of humans today, when we don't have our needs met, when we're not living kind of like we should, having to put in effort in life and live like this kind of wild life that we evolved in, we look for stimulation from somewhere else. So there's this theory called the optimal stimulation theory. And it basically says that when we don't get enough stimulation in our lives, we go looking for it other places. And that's exactly what this is leaning into. So when you think of humans, it's like we live very differently than we did in the past, right? We evolved in landscapes that were hard. We had to go work for our food. We were exercising all the time just through life and living it. We were outdoors, on and on and on. And when you think about how we live today, we don't have that level of stimulation in our life anymore. We really don't. And so we go searching for it elsewhere. And so I think you start to see things like some people fulfill that stimulation through shopping. Some fulfill it through drugs, some through alcohol, some through TikTok, some through slot machines. And I can tell you that for sure because I live in Las Vegas and the town wouldn't exist if this weren't a thing. And so that's kind of a long way of saying people search for stimulation. And if shopping is your stimulation, what else can you get stimulation from and fulfill that underlying thing that you're trying to solve for in a way that doesn't lead you to accumulate a bunch of stuff?
And a bunch of debt. And I mean, that's the other thing is, and he was talking about Dave Ramsey. I mean, Dave Ramsey would certainly agree with me when I say the best way to get out of debt is to stay out of debt. That is often the problem that I see with people's closets as well. They clean it all out. They don't know why they did it. They just felt like they were supposed to do it, or they're supposed to get out of debt. They're supposed to organize their house. And then a week later, a month later, a year later, it is re-cluttered, or you're back in debt because A, you didn't replace it with anything meaningful. And so you default to your defaults, as Kapil Gupta says, that what happens is my default is shopping gave me a little burst of happiness. I know it wasn't actually working for me, but it's working more than doing nothing. And so because my life isn't hard, in a weird way, Jeremy's making his life harder because it makes him feel alive. Would you agree with that?
Right. It gives him something that feels like a win, right? Yeah. It feels like effort. It feels like, so another thing I talk about in Scarcity Brain is this idea of the scarcity loop. So I live in Las Vegas, as I mentioned, and the weirdest thing you see in Vegas, and there's a lot of weird things you see in Vegas, let me just say that, is slot machines, okay? They are everywhere. Gas stations, grocery stores, airports, bars, restaurants. And people play them around the clock. Like I will get groceries at 6 a.m. and there's people playing slot machines. You just play and play and play. And to me, being a journalist, I mean, my job really is to observe something. And if it doesn't make sense, then I go, okay, well, what's up with that? Let's figure it out. So long story short is I see these people playing slot machines and I'm like, how the hell does that work? Because everyone knows the house always wins. But you've got thousands and thousands of people playing these things nonstop. So this, long story short, through, talking to this guy who puts me in touch with this lady, who puts me in touch with this lady, I end up at this place called Blackfire Innovation. And it's in Las Vegas. It's on the edge of the desert. It's a brand new cutting edge casino. But the catch is it's not really open to the public in a sense that a normal casino is. It is a behavior laboratory. So it's a fully working, brand new casino, but it's used entirely for research. And while I'm there, I talk to this guy who's a slot machine designer. And he basically tells me, okay, like, here's how a slot machine works. And it works on the system that I call the scarcity loop. Okay, so it's got 3 parts. It's got opportunity, unpredictable rewards, and quick repeatability. So you have an opportunity to get something of value. In the case of a slot machine, it's money. Unpredictable rewards, if you keep playing, you'll get that thing of value. But you don't know when, and you don't know how big it's going to be. Right? So with the slot machine, you play, the wheels spin, anything could happen. Nothing, something, or like, oh my God, I can retire now, right? And then quick repeatability. You can repeat the behavior immediately for as long as you want. So that is what makes gambling so compelling to people. But the important part and why this big research lab exists is that you can put this loop system in all kinds of other things and capture human attention and drive us to do behaviors that are seemingly irrational in the long run. So for example, it's really what makes social media work. It's in dating apps. The real unlock of dating apps was using this. It's in sports betting apps. It's in shopping, to bring it back. So a lot of shopping is now leaning into this loop where if you think about shopping, it's like, if I'm our call-in here, like I have an opportunity to get something of value or at least distract myself, but I don't know what it's going to be. And I don't know how good it's going to be. So I go out into the internet or whatever it might be, and I'm searching for that thing. I think it's going to be this. I'm reading reviews. And oh my God, there's a lightning deal on this. Bam, that's just like a jackpot. And then I can repeat that as often as possible because the internet is endless. I mean, it's the exact same architecture as a slot machine.
I think there's also a component here where we tell ourselves, I'm going to be different. You said that everyone knows that the house always wins, but there are the exceptions. There's someone who's so cunning or just so lucky that they're able to win. And I think that's the story that I told myself when I was climbing the corporate ladder. I started to get closer to the guys who I aspired to be like. I wanted to be a C-level executive and continue to climb that ladder. But as I got closer to them, they weren't bad human beings, but they were they were really miserable. I had one boss who was on his 3rd divorce and 2nd heart attack, and he wasn't even 50 yet. And I realized that I'm telling myself a story. And that story is, but I'll be different. I'm following the same recipe. I know I'm going to bake the same cake. For some reason in my mind, the story is, don't worry, I will be different. If I get what he has, I will be happy. Even though it didn't make him happy, of course, I must be different. What's behind that?
Well, part of that is it's unpredictable, right? It's, I will say that unpredictability, it captures attention of every single animal. Like if there's a question that you might get something of value, but you don't know exactly how valuable it's going to be, our attention focuses in every single time. And I do think, to your point about stories, we all like to think we're terminally unique, right? Unfortunately,
what a great term.
Unfortunately, we're not. And oftentimes you learn that through going through the processes. Now, at the same time, to your point about gambling, it's like, yeah, some people walk away with more money than they came into the casino with. But the longer you play, the house always wins. I mean, the math just doesn't make sense. You can get a rare win, and if you leave right then, you will get more money than the casino. Mm-hmm. The longer you play, you're eventually going to lose.
You're essentially talking about winning the lottery then. But then the difference with slot machines or even with shopping is if you win the lottery once, but then you go take your $100 million and buy 100 million more lottery tickets, you're probably still not going to win a second time. And that is the pernicious aspects of gambling or shopping, or these things that promise rewards. There are diminishing returns, even if you do get a minuscule reward or even a big reward up front. I hope you enjoyed that highlight from the Minimalist Private Podcast. If you'd like another highlight, check out this video. If you'd like to watch the minimal episode, check out this video. Or if you'd like to dive deep into full episodes of the Minimalist Private Podcast, head on over to Patreon. The link is in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.